Hey, everybody. Hope you're having an awesome day, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is. It is Cattle Mutilation Day. Jason, I know this is like your first or second favorite topic to bounce
Sure
around.
is. Oh, it's my definitely my top two topics. It's alien abductions and cattle mutilations for me all day long.
There you go.
Love
Well,
it.
we have an expert with 35 years experience, former law enforcement officer as well, Chuck Zukowski. He's been on TV shows like Alien Highway. And recently, just a couple days ago, there was a report coming out of Texas. There's now one in Oklahoma. So we're literally in the middle of a mini cattle mutilation flap. I know a lot of people kind of scoff at the phenomenon and take a lot of other things seriously in our field, but not so much cattle mutilations. We do want to give you some stats and some facts before making up your mind. I think some of that stuff might actually might blow your mind more than as soon as you think you got anything figured out in this type of phenomenon, you don't. And we even learned some stuff last time we had Chuck on. I'm sure we will again today. So, Jason, get ready. I hope you got something to drink, man.
I'm gonna get the barbecue sauce ready because this is cattle mutilations.
Jason's fired up. I'm fired up. It is nighttime where we are. But it's going to be a cool dive onto the world of cattle mutilations, high strangeness, black helicopters, all the good stuff. So stick around. We're going to get Mr. Chuck Zukowski on, and we'll be right back right here on UAP Studies Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my good friend, Mr. Jason Gilmet.
I'm happy to be here tonight. This is actually, we're doing a recording at nighttime. We got Chuck right before he went on holidays. We got him right before he left. And thank you so much. We do appreciate you being here. Louis, I'll throw it back to you, my man.
Yeah, so we had Chuck on a few months ago. Many of you have seen him on TVs. He's a host of Alien Highway, former volunteer law enforcement officer. He's been investigating UFOs and kind for over 35 years. But tonight we're going to talk about cattle mutilations, as there has been some recent media reports on that. So welcome to the show, Chuck. Good to have you back.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Cattle mutilation, some scary stuff, and
absolutely.
And, anytime we have it, one of my main concerns is to get the information out to the public as quick as possible because of other ranchers.
Right.
It's, it could affect other ranchers. These things have a tendency of happening in waves. So as soon as we hear about one, I get that information out. Now, my website, UFOnut.com, it's a free site, and all my investigations, it's not like some of these paid sites. So everything's free to the viewers and the readers to come over and peruse and make their own judgments. I just put the information out there based on my experience, and I try not to make assumptions.
Right.
And I try and use science and logic and think analytically when I do these because you can be wrong.
And what I love about your writing as well on the way you blog is that you explain step by step how you got to even the ranchers. How did you get to the ranchers? How did you first find out about it? And I want to pick your brain a little later on down on the show about that because it's brilliant. I think as a person who'd like to investigate this myself, I like seeing the step by step from a serious and professional investigator at this point, showing us how to do it, right? Showing us the ropes. So I love,
it can get wordy because sometimes I want so much information in there that I don't want to leave the reader scratching their head. I want them to be able to, once they finish the blog, and maybe they got to get a cup of coffee or maybe read it over a couple of days.
right.
Because nowadays with social media and some of the stuff with TikTok and these are like 30-second, and even some of the blogs out there, it's got to be a 3-minute read or something just because. But you really can't get into depth when you're doing something as traumatic as animal mutilation, or you're investing a lot of time to do a type of UFO or Bigfoot investigation. You kind of want the reader to know a little bit of the backstory, how you got there, and what you found out.
Sure. So what was it about cattle mutilations? I mean, there's so many aspects to the UAP and UFO phenomenon. Not everybody delves into this. In fact, many of our viewers who are pretty seasoned at a lot of things may not know much about this. So what was it for you that said, I don't want to just look at craft in the sky or, ET-based phenomenon? What was it for you that got you interested in the cattle mutilation aspect?
I'm a morbid guy anyway. Yeah.
Sixth sense of humor?
Well, before I got married, my buddy and I, Mark Kalin, I'll just throw his name out there, but he was really into models, science fiction models, and comic books, and I got involved into it, and we go to these, Fangora and different types of conferences about the special effects used. So, I got out of high school, I was pretty much, already getting involved in some morbid stuff. So when cattle mutilation investigation came along, it really didn't affect me that much. I already had a mindset, looking into it. The very first one I did, I threw together a team real quick because at the time I was a MUFON S.T.A.R investigator, and it was going to be the very first S.T.A.R investigation for MUFON. And Robert Bigelow was actually funding the S.T.A.R team at the time. And so I threw together a team. We went out to this mutilation in Weston, Colorado. And anyway, during the investigation, one of my team members just walked away and went back to the vehicle. The other two kind of hung there for a little bit, and then after the mutilation, they both said, we're not going to do this anymore. It's just, we just can't deal with it. So over the years, I had a person, Matt Morgan, that would go with me that actually did some of the videotaping, and he was really good, comfortable in front of, dead animals and the smell and, just, the stuff that, you see. But most people, they don't, they really don't want to kind of deal with it because, you look at it and you're looking at this dead animal that was just alive maybe 24, 48 hours before, just, happy-go-lucky eating grass in the field. The next day it's laying on the ground all cut up, and nobody knows how it was killed and why it was killed. So it's a very scary kind of situation.
Yeah. And there's no signs of struggle. And we're going to get into the history of this, but there's no signs of struggle with these cows or these animals. There's more than just cows being found. There's other animals as well, but there's no struggle from a 3,000, 4,000 pound animal. There's not a single sign of protest, and that is crazy.
Yeah, and we can, when you want me to go in and explain that, unless you want me to explain it now, it's really interesting. But as an investigator, the very first thing I do is when I go to an animal mutilation investigation is I look at the animal from a safe distance, and I've done enough of them now. The very first couple, oh my gosh, you have to really, really be careful. I was already a trained, investigator, been doing a lot of stuff with UFOs and some other things before that, monster investigations and stuff. So I was kind of aware of what to watch out for, but you really don't know how this animal died.
Right.
And, it could be viral. And if it's viral, you walk up on it and it infects you, then in turn, you go home and you affect the whole family. So you really have to be careful with these things.
Yeah. Right. So earlier today, I was putting together a list because I wanted to try to make this, and Jason as well, as digestible for people who don't know.
Digestible.
Sorry, no pun intended.
That was good, Louis. That was still good.
All right. It's an evening recording, whatever. But
choice of words, but okay.
And I wanted to be sharp too, because I know you're one of the foremost expert on this. So I put together a little list, and we can go into some of these things and kind of pick them apart. But these are some of the most common things that seem to be present with these cattle mutilations. So if anybody right off the bat saying, "Oh, this is all nonsense," let me read the list here. So typically, the wounds appear as clean cuts, almost surgical in precision. The animal tends to be drained of all blood. There's none on the fur, like no hemorrhaging, and there's none on the grass or the surrounding area. Blood is just gone, completely absent. This was a cool one I just learned today. 90% of the animals studied in a lab are between 4 and 5 years of age. I don't know if that has any impact or not, but big majority of them tend to be within that age range. Strange marks or imprints in the soil, absence of tracks, or any signs of humans, vehicles, things like that. When they've done sort of pathological tests after the fact, pathology tests, they have an unusually high or low level of certain vitamins and minerals. So potassium, calcium are either off the chart or non-existent for whatever reason. They also find unusual chemicals that you wouldn't normally have in livestock present as well. Typically, there is removal of sex organs, rectum parts, sometimes internal organs missing, or organs rearranged in such a way that wouldn't be consistent with a natural death in the wild. The animal hides tend to be brittle. There's a lack of animal predation, so that even wild animals don't want to eat these cows after they've been mutilated. And typically they're found at a different location than from where they went missing or where they were last seen. So that's just a general summary on that. We can, Chuck, I can throw it to you. You pick what you like first, but that is pretty crazy, involving finding just dead animals in a field. There's a hell of a lot.
Right. There is, and there's a lot of misinformation out there too from people who are more like couch investigators that may have never gone to an investigation, actually seen one up front, and maybe they'll read some periodical or a book or something, and then they come up. I mean, like the brittle hide, I've never seen that. Chemicals in the blood, I've never seen that either. There was even cases of micrometeorites on the hide. I've never seen that. Fluorescence on the hide. Well, the only fluorescence you're going to see under a black light is in the anal area where urine, may be present, from when the animal was alive. So there's a few things that organs, if they're misplaced, it's not because they were purposely misplaced. It's because other organs were removed. And as they were removed, the ones that whoever's doing this didn't want kind of pushed them aside.
Or filled the void now created.
Oh, you want to talk, with this organ mutilation that happened on March 30th. We can go in that a little bit later, but what happened internally is really interesting. And it's cool because when I delve into these things and really get into the meat of investigation, I learn new stuff. And so, some of the things you mentioned, I've never actually come across. I'm not saying that's not the case. I personally haven't come across them. And I don't know, it could be due to other circumstances.
Yeah. And so as a question, because this is not a new phenomenon, this is a phenomenon we've been dealing with for quite some time. Can you give us a bit of a background on the phenomenon, like how it kind of started and basically led to you now leading some of the best investigations of the world on the subject? Like, how did this originate? When did this first pop up?
Well, originally it was in 1967 outside of Alamosa at the base of Blanca Peak in the San Luis Valley with Snippy the horse. Actually, the name was actually Lady, but the media got it wrong and called the horse Snippy. I think that was Lady's, sibling or something. And, that horse was the first time that the media looked at a mutilation case in this century, basically, that, and then it went worldwide. Nobody knew, law enforcement, the ranchers, they had no idea how this animal died, let alone how the cuts, who caused the cuts, how the cuts were made.
Right.
It's really interesting. I'm going to throw out a real quick fact here. In the San Luis Valley, little town of Hooper, is the UFO watchtower run by Judy Meslin. She's been doing this for a few years now. And she's got a neat little watchtower that overlooks the San Luis Valley, camping there and stuff. But within the last year or so, she's acquired Snippy the horse's bones, and she has them on display there. It's a really big part of animal mutilation history to see the actual skeleton from the very first animal that was mutilated that went worldwide. Now, that's not the first one that actually was ever mutilated. I found an article back in, I think it was like 1896, where it was a town in Missouri where at night the residents of this farm, they saw this light with these the big light with these little lights and flashing and stuff, and pretty much scared the hell out of them. And they went inside the house and boarded up all the doors. The next morning they went out to the location to check on the livestock, and the father found 3 dead animals void of blood. So that is the common denominator for every one of these new cases, is the lack of blood. So I get asked from time to time, who's ever doing it, what do they want? Why cut here, why cut there? I can go into that a little bit, but the bottom line is it's always about the blood. If it's not a cow, a horse, a pig, a dog, what else have I, goat. And I've done a few different types of mammals other than cows.
You mentioned Snippy the horse. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I read, this horse's head and neck was like skin removed and defleshed. So you have a horse and then a skeleton from the neck to the head.
Right. And I've actually done, two separate ranches, calf mutilation investigations where it's the calf head and the legs, and the hide is on the legs, it's on the head, but all in between is cleared. It's just clean, just like the part you described with Snippy the horse.
Wow.
I've actually investigated. Well, let's see. We had one rancher had like 4 of those, and another rancher had 1. And this is what's really scary, because your skeptics will say, well, it's got to be a predator or a scavenger or something. But with calves, the ranchers keep an eye on their calves because of coyotes, and they count them every day because this is a business. They just don't have cows out there. This is their job, and they count the cows, and they keep them all corralled together out in the fields and move them from field to field. So pretty much every time that I've been called for something like this where a calf has been missing is because it was counted the day before, and the next day, that's just how they find it. And when they find an animal like that, once again, it's laying on the ground. There's absolutely no signs of massive amounts of blood, carnage from a predator like a mountain lion coming and ripping things apart and be flesh everywhere. And I actually did a blog on that a few years ago where I showed what a mutilation case is, and then what carnage is from predators and how much blood is like everywhere and on the hide. But even with a skinned skeleton, down to a skeleton, there's no evidence of the blood on the ground. And that's kind of scary when you really look at it from a human point of view. When, how did that thing get skinned without leaving any trace of how it got skinned and where all that skin is?
Yeah.
Except for one case. I had one case, and this was really interesting because I've done a lot of these. The animal was skinned down to the head and to the skeleton, and it was all connected. It was laying here, and the skin was laying next to it. First time I've ever seen that. And the hind end, or where the hips would be, there were 2 holes, symmetrical holes on each side. Never seen that before. I've never seen it since.
That's gotta mess up your lunch break for sure.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's you do see something new every time, and like I learned something new with the Oregon case, and I've been working with a deputy on the Texas case too, and we can talk about that a little later. Then I can tell you about the Oklahoma case that just happened like the night before last.
Yeah. So we covered the history, kind of how this started, and investigators. Now, obviously, through times like in the 70s and 80s, you had Linda Moulton Howe, which we're having soon, Louis, on the show. Yep. And she was investigating this, and obviously, people like Christopher O'Brien investigate this as well. You're kind of thrown into this. This is something that you're now part of and investigating. One, it's got to be a little bit surreal that you get to do this when nobody else seems interested, and you're like, oh boy, it's like going to a candy store at this point. It's just, what else am I going to find, right?
Oh, it's like, boy, I got to drive another 3 hours today.
Yeah, on your dime too, right? Because you're not being paid to do this. So that's another thing that is pretty cool.
Well, I'm not discrediting Linda Moulton Howe or Christopher O'Brien, but the difference between them and me is I'm a field investigator, and they're more of investigative journalists.
Right. Okay.
And, Chris O'Brien writes books from it. Linda Moulton Howe, well, she just says she's an investigative journalist. And so they really don't get deep into it. They get enough of whatever information they need, and then they kind of speculate from that. And I'm not saying anything negative about it because Linda, she started the ball, the ball rolling.
Yeah, pioneer, right? Yeah.
Right. And I respect her. It's just that one of the differences is, I'm the guy like, do you know L.A. Marzullo? Have you heard of him?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Well, he has his own channel, and he does his own movies and stuff. And we were kind of like shooting a documentary about a month or so ago out in the middle of nowhere in Colorado. And while he was in the motel or hotel sleeping, I was out in the middle of of nowhere with a night vision camera till about 11:30 at night by myself. Just look, it was a clear night, and I took advantage of it. And I just in an area where there have been UFO sightings in the past. So these are some of the things that people won't do. Is they put their own health at risk or life at risk by going out to these areas by themselves to satisfy their own drive. And yeah, I've been called less than smart for doing that. Back in the day, I would tell my wife, "This is where I'm going. I plan to be home by 3 in the morning. If I'm not home by 5, call the police." And literally, that's what I would tell her. But nobody else wants to do that stuff, And,
Yeah.
and when you take people with you, they turn it into a campfire, and then it just, you got to really be in that mode. I don't say stealth, but you just gotta, you know, black out the lights and everything, hang back and just wait for something if something's going to happen. Just spare time stuff. That's just stuff I do in the spare time in between investigations.
Right.
It's kind of stupid, but I do pick up some strange lights sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. There's also been reports of like balls of light, sometimes UFO, sometimes even Bigfoot associated in the same area as cattle mutilation. So, can you share any cool info in regards to that?
Yeah, I was doing well. We were researching. I say we because a buddy of mine, Joe Fex, who was a Bigfoot investigator, was with me, and we were in the San Luis Valley, um, on the other side of Hooper, where the watchtower is, and we had heard of a mutilation case that was at the base of the mountains, and also a Bigfoot, sighting. And that's why Joe was with me, being the Bigfoot investigator, and we went out. And that was one of the first times where I actually, we didn't find the carcass, and we were looking for Bigfoot footprints and stuff. We didn't find anything, but that was the first time that, I was called to do that type of investigation, a combination of Bigfoot and an animal mutilation. It's really interesting. Now, we do get a lot of UFO sightings around Bigfoot sightings. So one's watching the other, and so you have a third person, like someone out there hiking or camping, and they can experience both those things. But it's really interesting how animal mutilations can correlate with other things too, like UFOs and Bigfoot.
Right, because the two have been linked for quite some time. I mean, it's not uncommon. You got toys now that they sell. Even I have a painting back there that I painted of a cow being taken by a flying saucer. I mean, it's so common. We all sort of accept it, right? But
I got shirts. I got a shirt of a Bigfoot actually being abducted by a flying saucer flying out, and then another one with a cow. And
yeah,
but I get people all the time because I've done some Bigfoot investigations, and I have to be honest with you, I was off in my right over here. I've got, I don't know if you probably can't see it, but there's a footprint from the Patterson case.
I can kind of see it. Yeah,
and it's a first generation, well, not first generation, second generation from the actual print. And even with the Bigfoot footprints and some of the footprints you see out there, when you go back to the Patterson case, there's certain things about the footprint and certain lines that depicts what a real Bigfoot, casting is, as opposed to a fake one. And that's why I like having that there, because that's my model of determining what's real and what's not, and what could be faked. But this has been going on for a long time too. One of the lucky things about me being out here in Colorado is, we're in the Four Corners area, but Colorado Springs has a Ute tribe, and you get out to San Luis Valley, and there'll be Navajo, and then you get into New Mexico and you have the Apaches. So I've been extremely lucky to be able to talk with our Native Americans and to hear about, their stories that have been brought up through the history. And I have to be, well, this is really interesting. So, doesn't matter what tribe you talk to, they have their own name for Bigfoot. Of course, Sasquatch is a Native American name, and they have their own name for UFOs. But I talked to a Ute elder and found out that they have their own name for a gray alien.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, and this is something that has been going through generations, and so the grays may be something new to us, at least within the past 50, 60 years or since Roswell. But to the Native Americans, these stories are kind of like handed down. It's really even Tommy knockers and Menahunis and leprechauns and stuff. The Native Americans have their own form of a leprechaun or Tommy knocker, and they all have a name for that. They've all seen them, and they every now and then they'll still see these little guys. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there.
I think
Yeah.
John Mack did ask the Dalai Lama if they had such tales and stuff like that about little guys that broke into people's homes and took them in the middle of the night. And he said, yes, they did. In Tibet, they have legends about that as well. So it's crazy, this phenomenon, even not, now it's modern. I mean, we're zooming from a great distance right now. It's amazing what we can do with technology. But back in the day when we couldn't share this information, it just stayed local. It was a local problem. It wasn't a global problem. But now we're noticing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't until social media that I think whoever really knows what's going on realized that they're going to lose what hold they have on it because of social media. Everybody that has a phone, right, has got a video and photo capability, and the phones are getting better and better now at filming that. Matter of fact, for your viewers and listeners out there, if you see a UFO, you see something identified, it could be a ball of light floating by you on the ground or something floating by, please put your camera on video mode and shoot video. Do not shoot photos, especially if it's a light in the sky. Do not shoot a photo on it, because when they get turned into investigators like me, it just looks like a star or a planet, and it really is really nothing we can do about it. It's a great story. Oh yeah, this thing shot off and that. Well, if you're on video mode, you would have caught that. So I always mention on podcasts that if you see anything, anybody sees anything out there, click it on video mode. And in some cases, you'll get better lighting on video mode than you will on photo, because photo is trying to take pictures. The software tries to change background lights and the whole bit to give you the best photo, where video is a little different.
Right.
And you get multiple frames out of video too that you could splice, and one may not be as good. But you were speaking about native legends, and we have an upcoming episode with Avery Tafoya. So he's a Jicarilla Apache elder, a tribal council member. And when we chatted with him about Archuleta Mesa and UFOs and Bigfoot and all the rest, he mentioned that along with sightings and cattle mutilations, that they typically see a lot of black helicopters. And so I asked him about the mutilations and said, do you think this is ET or some type of other being, or are these man-made? And I was surprised when his opinion was that it's the military doing it. And I'm not sure if that's just because of the proximity of how soon you see them. I kind of look at it that maybe the military is investigating, knowing that these things happen. But I thought that it's such a similar topic, and you just brought it up. What are your thoughts on that? Is this an outside force doing this, or is this?
Oh, no, yeah, it's an outside force, because first off, this has been going on for so long. Like with Snippy the horse back in '67, we didn't have, the stealth helicopters. Well, matter of fact, it's really interesting where some people, skeptics, will say, actually, I had one guy tell me, well, it's a special forces, and when they graduate, part of the graduation is to mutilate animals, sneak in and sneak out, and they have stealth helicopters in this. And then I go back and say, well, since 1967, when Snippy the horse went public, we've had well over 10,000 cases reported of animal mutilations, more than that actually now. It doesn't mean that, for every case that I do, like the case in Oregon, I found out that guy was hit before in the mid 70s. And I also find out another area near him was hit. So one case turns into, okay, 3 events actually happened there. So that's how you get up to the 10,000, over 10,000 cases over the period of years. But this guy says, yeah, they come in with stealth helicopters and do it all. And then I always like to throw back, when we were going after bin Laden, it was a SEAL Team 6 flew a stealth helicopter into the compound, and if they had issues with the helicopter and they had to blow it up, right? So I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not too familiar with the story, but that's awesome. That sounds like a movie. Yeah.
Well, cool. I mean, that's when they went after him, they had mechanical problems, and the helicopter was inside the compound, and then they actually had to blow it up and had another helicopter, and that was a stealth helicopter. So even the best that the U.S. has for soldiers and the best of the technology failed. Right? Okay, 1 out of 2, 50%. There was 2 helicopters, 1 failed, and they were safely, they were able to safely leave. So now you have all these, 10,000 cases. You think one case out of 10,000, because humans, we're not perfect, and we leave evidence and we do all kinds of stuff. You think out of those cases that were investigated by law enforcement, there would have been one screw up if it was special forces, which tells, and if you just got to just look at, the reality of it and think about it intelligently. Everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. The one thing I learned when I was a deputy, and animal mutilations are crimes. It's an animal cruelty crime. And in Colorado, it's a misdemeanor if you get caught killing an animal. If you get caught killing multiple animals, that's a felony. So now you're a felon. So they take it seriously. So and then also the ranchers out here in Colorado, by law, can protect their livestock and shoot you. If they catch you trying to kill part of their livestock, they can take a shot at you legally.
So it's risky business, right?
It is, especially if you're the person that's doing the cutting up. So, in all those cases, the 10,000 cases that law enforcement has investigated, not once have they ever found any evidence of who committed the crime, if it be a predator or a human. And one thing like I said, I did learn as a deputy was every crime leaves evidence. Mm-hmm. Now, we have books and books and books about humans leaving evidence in crimes and stuff, but we don't want to have anything when it comes to the paranormal. So we're kind of writing this as we go along. So when it comes to animal mutilations, as a field investigator, as opposed to the investigative journalists who don't do this, you try to come up with ways of capturing evidence you don't know about and evidence you can't see. And you go, right. Well, how do you do that? Well, you just got to be very creative. A few of my cases, I shot full spectrum camera during the daytime. You go, well, how'd you do that? Well, I have a white light blocker filter that fits over the camera, blocks out all the white lights so I can see, everything other than white light. White light is what we can see. I want to see infrared, right? I want to see what our eyes can't see. And I have a new camera now that I have a filter for that too. So you look for stuff like that. Of course, we've used black lights looking for fluorescence and other things too. But you really got to think out of the box, way out of the box, to try and figure out how to capture evidence is there.
Right.
Just don't know what it is.
So this phenomenon, we talked about this or touched on it really briefly, is global. It's an issue, and it seems to jump around. In the United States, it seems like it comes in waves all the time, and it does so in Europe as well. I mean, Europe just went through a phase of having mutilations there as well, some of their livestock, including horses, and now it's picking back up again in the States. And I know there's just a new wave that just started, and we're going to get into that on how you got started in this new wave. But how many a year do you normally get? How many cases a year?
Well, I was just talking to a rancher last month, and was at his site and talking. And this was the rancher that's had, I forget, 14 or 15 mutilation cases. It's been quiet for the past couple of years, and when I hear about mutilations occurring anywhere in the U.S., I always I text my ranchers to let them know, hey, could be something, just stay aware. But I was just talking to Tom and Sally, and then I was talking to Mike, and we're going, wow, it's been quiet for a couple of years, and it's coming back. So the problem is, and I spent a lot of time when I first got involved in this to try to figure out if there was a pattern.
Right.
And I would look at moon phases, or anything that has to do with meteorite showers, or anything like that, anything that I could look at that happens that we can actually monitor. The problem is we can't see the big picture. Now, we're constantly moving. I know we're sitting down still right now, but the earth is spinning, we're moving, right? The earth is moving around the sun, so we're moving around that. The sun is moving inside our galaxy. Our galaxy is moving towards the Andromeda galaxy. We're never in the same space. Every millisecond, we're in a new part of uncharted space, literally, right? We really
Right.
are. We travel back and forth, to the moon or whatever, and our probes and hitting the different planets. But that's in our little tiny space. That's like me moving around in this room. But you have to go outside that room, outside the house, outside the state, outside the country, to really to understand the big picture, that we're never in the same space twice. So that means there could be events happening way out of our thought process, our control of what could be some of the key factors of what's going on here in a little tiny planet. So but here I haven't really, I've got some ideas. When I came up with the 37th parallel thing, and we could talk, I know we probably talked about that earlier, getting some ideas of how we can track stuff here in the US when it's active, right?
Yeah.
But not when it's not active. And I know there's a lot of people who, I don't want to say claim to be psychic, but that, oh yeah, something's going to happen. Well, like Nostradamus, or Sleeping Prophet. But you really don't know.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to think like these guys do. If there are aliens, you would have to think like an alien to be an alien, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to be an alien to think like an alien. So when I listen to some of these guys, well, whoa, why don't they do this? Because they don't think like a human.
Right.
That's you saying that, right? We don't know how these guys think. We don't know if the Greys are just, just little clones that are, pre-programmed, and they're like worker ants just doing their thing. I mean, you could care less about what's going on. You care less who's watching them. They just do their thing and get it done. But there is, I believe, a hierarchy within that too. So,
right.
You mentioned moving around, and one thing I find fascinating, and I think I've heard you say this on another show, is that sometimes these ranchers, and again, these ranchers are used to seeing casual death, right? On a farm and a ranch, you have dead animals all the time. So they're so, traumatized by what they see. It's clearly not anything within the norm, but some of them will move and go somewhere else. And this phenomena seems to follow.
Mm-hmm. There was a case where a rancher left Texas, and I think he went into New Mexico, and he got hit again. And what's interesting about, it's so funny. I'm so happy you brought this up, because one rancher Sanchez, was a little town in San Luis, which is near the New Mexico border in Colorado. He moved his animals. Ranchers will say, "Hey, can you move your animals to my pasture? Help me cut the grass there. And you feed your animals and bring the grass." They don't want brush fires, because there's a lot of brush fires out there. So they kind of keep control of the vegetation. So different ranchers will move their cows around on other people's ranches, to keep, the fire danger down and everything else. And so Rancher Sanchez moved his cows to a field in this middle. The other rancher had his cows on this field and this field. There were a fence in between. Rancher Sanchez got hit. His mutilated, got a cow was mutilated in between the other. None of the other ranchers ever were ever hit. When I was talking to Tom Miller last month, he's in between, his ranch is in between two other ranches, and they're spread out pretty far, yet it's always him that gets hit. Although his rancher down the street did get hit once, and it was a dog. And that's the only one that I really know of. But as for cows, and what we were joking about was Tom had sold his cows to the rancher next to him. because he's getting into retirement phase, and so he sold his cows, and he's leasing his land, to the other guy so that cows can graze on that. But his cows are now mixed in with the other guy's cows. Now, if he gets hit again, if the ranch gets hit again, it'll be interesting to find out if it's his cow or the other guy's cow that gets hit.
Right.
So now they're all together.
Could be like a specific breed of cow or a certain genetic strain or something, or
no,
just random.
Just random. And back in the day, you would have the Linda Moulton House and the Chris O'Brien's. Chris O'Brien kind of changed his tune lately. I think he's more into it's a government cover up, and the government's been doing it. But I think Linda Moulton House is still, thinking what she originally thought of. Somewhere down the road, we kind of lost Chris O'Brien, the way he was thinking. When I do investigations, I don't point to any one thing. I always look at the crime itself and try and figure out that crime and how it happened and who's responsible for it. Now, when you talked about military, the military does show up, but they show up after the fact. So they're running their own investigations. And a few of my cases, they've been helicopters at night hovering over the location where the animals were mutilated. They're running their own investigations. That might be part of the Pentagon. Pentagon, when it came out in 2017, we knew before that somebody in the government had, a program that were investigating UFOs, because way back when I was first introduced to Robert Bigelow with the S.T.A.R team, he was funding the S.T.A.R team, but he, in my opinion, wasn't funding the S.T.A.R team with his own money. He was getting paid, to
subsidized. Yeah.
Yes, and then his lab was actually jumping the MUFON investigators. So, when MUFON got a report of something that was really good, that they would have to use the elite investigators to investigate rather than just the ones less experienced. They had to go through Robert Bigelow, and Bigelow's guys, it would take them a couple of days to come back and say, go investigate it. But we found out a few times that within that couple of days, they ran their own guys over to run the investigation. So at the time, I was thinking, well, he's a billionaire. What am I going to do? I'm a hundredaire, right?
Right.
I got a few $100, and that's about it. But
you got hundreds of dollars?
I got hundreds of dollars. I might even
crazy.
Have. But when you got millions and billions, you can't compete with that. There's no way. And so we found out that his team was actually jumping, our teams that MUFON was sending out. Then when it came out, and so back in the day, I had a suspicion that he was actually working for somebody else. It wasn't just him; he was working for somebody else. I thought it was the CIA or something, but it came out in 2017. He was actually working for the Pentagon. So I was partly right. I just had the wrong department.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. We've spoken to a few people now, Louis, that
quite a few. And Jeremy Ray,
yeah.
a big MUFON S.T.A.R team guy, he was on here. He alluded to the same.
Yeah.
So it's not a big secret. But I know I want to ask you about this recent Texas mutilation, because it's relevant. It's what sparked the interest in doing this show. So 6 cows, I believe, over a couple different counties. All the usual signs, right? Like missing tongues, missing flesh from the jaw, genitals removed, no blood. What can you tell us about this recent mutilation flap?
This is really interesting. I just found out today, I have a source. Let's just say that in Texas. So I can say right now, I have a source.
It's classified. Yeah.
I can't divulge my source.
It's like the mafia. I know a guy who knows a guy. Leave it at that.
I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. And we think maybe it was only 5. One died of natural causes. But when this started happening, it came out public. And I'll talk a little bit about Oregon a little bit later, but part of Oregon, some of the things that I do, because I was a previous deputy, kind of opens doors for me. And I use that. Of course, I'm going to use that,
Sure.
Yeah, if I was a magician, I'd do tricks to try and get stuff that I, wanted. Not like Bill Cosby did, but
It was quite the trick he pulled. Yeah.
No
that
drink
was
to
quite the
choose.
trick. Nothing that bad. But I'll go in uh, and with the Madison County Sheriff's Department. I was just after I found out about it the next day, I got right in. I called the Madison County Sheriff's Department, their dispatch. I told them who I was. I told them I was a former deputy. I told them that from Colorado. I'm doing investigations. Da da da. You can look me up or whatever. And so I was able to find out who the investigative deputy is for them, and I was able to get her phone, actually, number basically. And I tried a couple of times, and I got through and was able to talk to her, personally. Of what I was looking for was a case report. Now I'm in Colorado. This is Texas, so the best I can do is go through law enforcement first, see if they have their case report filed. And if they do, track down the case report, get the case report number, and then pay for it. You have to pay for it. And so you have to go through all the different steps to get the pay, the case report. So I contacted her, and we had a really nice chat. And I really feel sorry. Besides her doing her regular job, she's been inundated internationally now. It's internationally known. So this poor lady is getting hit from all sides, from media and investigators and looky-loo people, and hey, I have this theory and I have that theory and stuff. And she's doing the best to try and get everything done. But we went on my website. I had her, "Are you on a computer?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Go to my website, look at my previous blog on the Oregon one, look at the pictures," because we haven't seen any pictures really, and because the ranchers are staying on the down low on this. And she's looking at it. She says, "Yeah, the pictures you have from the Oregon mute resemble the cows that I've seen, in Texas." And then she was kind of reading through it. And then I spent about a half hour briefing her from the investigative point of view, what I look for doing an animal mutilation case, what makes it different from, a regular animal cruelty case, which I'm quite familiar too with, because of lack of evidence and some other things. So we really had a really good conversation, traded a lot of information back and forth. It still is trying. If she can't get it to me, I'll just have to wait for the case report. But I sent them my bio. I sent them a bunch of information on animal mutilations. And what I was trying to do is I'm trying to, persuade them to give me some pictures and some preliminary notes, about her case before they go public with the actual case. The issue is, she would have to go talk to the sheriff directly and ask permission. But I tried to call her again today because I just talked to her the other day. I didn't get an answer. This might be your day off, because usually deputies will take a day off during the weekday if they work weekends. That's usually the case. And sometimes they'll work 4/10s. And that's like if they're, plus any overtime. So I haven't, she hasn't got back to me yet. I'm going to try again tomorrow to see if I can weasel some more information. I do have boots on the ground on somebody over there who has got a medical background. We've already identified one of the ranchers. We know who the rancher is. We know the location of where the animal, was mutilated. We have a general idea where there are a couple of other, locations. And, when you're a field investigator, you just, you do research, but you really have to get in and randomly just go after, try and find the information. There was a case years ago in Walsenburg, Colorado, that 8 cows were mutilated at one time. And I thought that would be all over the news. The only reason why this is because we've had a lot of UFO sightings and the Pentagon and the whole bit. So, there's a heightened, of ufology right now. And so the buttes are, really coming into play. But I had 8 cows in Walsenburg. I didn't know where they were. I had a general area where they were. I drove out to Walsenburg, it's a good hour and a half from my house. I sat in the middle of a couple of different county roads in open areas waiting for a truck to come by, a rancher truck, flag them down and ask them, have you heard about this? And within a couple of hours, I was at the ranch where 4 of the animals were mutilated. And within the next hour, I knew where the other 4 were. So it's sometimes you have to really be a detective. You have to really get in and do detective work.
So, curiosity here. I used to be in insurance. So I keep thinking about these farmers that are losing, let's say 4 to 8 cows at a time. They're expensive. I mean, how much is a cow? Like $3 to $5 grand? Maybe more.
$2,500.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Out of actually, if there's something else you have to think about. Out of all the cases I've done, I think there was only one case that was actually a corporation where they had insurance on their cows. Most of these smaller ranches, they're free grazing animals and they don't have insurance on their cows.
Right.
So right. Now, they may purchase a calf, $200, $300, but see, the calf grows up and calves, right? And over a period of, let's say, 10 years or 15 years, as long as that cow is alive, it calves. And then each calf can calf. And each calf's calves can calf. And each calf's calves can calf, And so you have that multiplier effect. So that $200, if you lose that animal, you lose the next, life expectancy of that animal, of what it could calf, and the life expectancy of every calf and this calf and this calf. And you can go into hundreds. I mean, you can literally be down $100,000 off of one animal over a period of time. People don't realize that. And it's really a big burden to a lot of these ranchers that may not have 2,000 head of cattle. And they, it's not Yellowstone from TV,
Right.
A lot of these guys may only have 50, 60 head of cattle. So it's a real burden. And then when they lose a bull, which is their stud bull, sometimes a stud bull, now I think they do insure the stud bulls, because if the stud bull dies on their property, they've got to pay for it. Most of the times they'll lease a stud bull when it comes time. And if they lose it, that's a lot of money out of their pocket too, if they don't have insurance on
it. Male or female, more common?
Female is more common.
Yeah? Well, yeah. If you were to put a percentage on it, what would you give it?
Well, the reason why females are more common is because there's a lot more of them.
Okay.
No offense to the ladies out there. It's just like, Amazon, and it'll be all women and 2 guys. And that's what you're basically going to see a lot of ranches is you may see 2 or 3 bulls and the rest are all females.
Right.
And so it's just odds, and as for a bull itself, bull could be out, grazing in out in a pasture way away or whatever. And may be targeted for whatever reason, but law of averages is usually the females.
So if you had to venture a guess, and nobody knows, and I get that, but if you had to venture a guess about this whole cattle mutilation thing, what do you think it is?
42. No.
That's from Hitchhiker's Guide, right? Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah.
That's the answer to the universe, right?
Yeah.
So why are they doing, or
like, what do you think it is? Do you think, why are they doing it? What's the purpose behind it? This is just an imaginative guess. I'm just curious as to what you think after 35 plus years of research in this kind of thing. What's your summation as of right now? If you had to venture a guess.
I can tell you the probability of it being non-human is greater than the probability of it being human. And I hate to just come out and say it's aliens doing it, but
sure.
Some of my ranchers have seen balls of light. Some of them have seen craft, unknown crafts, from what they could recognize. What makes it a little bit different, like with the Oregon case, okay? There are certain questions that a deputy will not ask because they're looking at an animal cruelty case. So they keep their questions to the animal cruelty. There's no reason why they should think anything otherwise, because that's not their frame of mind. They know exactly. With El Paso County Sheriff's Department, out of all the deputies that they had, there was probably only 2 or 3 deputies that are actually trained to do animal death investigations, animal cruelty deaths. So those guys are always the ones that go out. So it's not every deputy can do that because they're not really trained for it. But when I talk to the rancher and I get all the information, I've already got the case report. Like with Oregon, Oregon was cool. I like Oregon. I had okay. So are you guys in a MUFON? Do you are you
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
MUFON?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
joined MUFON Canada. I haven't done anything lately with them. I mean, it's been almost a year since I've done any cases, but I'm still with
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah. It's I don't know what they're doing. I see a lot of red flags going on with them. I got the director of investigations that contacted me about a possible mutilation at the beginning of April in Oregon, had me contact the state director of Oregon because nobody in MUFON has got my experience in animal mutilations. I was MUFON's director of animal mutilation investigations. And then for some reason, after Jan Harzen debunkle, that position went away. And I never, after Jan, I really never went back to MUFON.
Right.
But so they contacted me to talk with the guy there, and he kind of gave me a little bit of information. I said, okay, well, what county is in? What's the sheriff's department? I want to talk to them. Nothing, crickets. He wouldn't return my calls or email. I gave him a couple of days. I'm going, okay. First off, you guys called me to get involved in this. I got involved, and now you're not giving me information as you're keeping it from me. I said, well, that's not going to work because I already know about it. So what I did is I started researching the mutilations that had occurred in Oregon in the past few years, and what counties they were in. And I sat on the phone, and I worked remote at home and doing this while I'm working my day job. And I basically called the sheriff's departments in those counties, and I talked to dispatch, and I would say, who could I talk to find out if there have been any animal cruelty cases turned in within the past couple of days. And one after another. And finally, Harney County in Oregon, I was in contact with the person who does the cases, that writes up the cases and stuff. And she was, yeah, we have them come in. And then I got the case report number, and then, paid for it a whole bit. And then that was my starting point. Now I knew the county. I still didn't know the rancher, so I started doing more research of areas, found out by talking to people, random people within, not, within the county, but not the sheriff's department, brand inspectors and stuff. And I nailed it down, was able to contact the rancher, got a hold of a phone number just by looking up phone numbers, and he sat and talked with me and gave me the whole spiel. So I had his testimony over a phone, and I still text. I text him today too, about these other cases. And then I had a case report. I put those both together, and that's what's on my blog right now. A combination. I've got his pictures on it that says "Courtesy Rancher." He did not want his name, revealed. And then I have some pictures that say "Courtesy," Harney County Sheriff's Department, because, once a case goes public, or once a case is filed, it's public because, the taxes pretty much pay for law enforcement. So, we can use that material and not have to worry about copyright issues because we kind of own it, so to speak. And so that's a combination there. But I actually had to do some groundwork like I did in Walsenburg to find this guy. And it's really interesting. So when I talked to him, after I found out everything about the animal and what happened and when they found it and that's okay. Now I have some interesting questions to ask you. First off, have you seen anything unusual in the area? Well, not really. I go, have you seen any types of lights in the area, maybe the past couple of weeks before the mutilation? And he goes, yeah. And I said, can you, tell me about that? He says, well, now this particular ranch, I know where it's at. And it's in the middle of nowhere.
And this is Oregon, right, Chuck?
It's Oregon.
Okay.
And there's a ranch 10 miles here and ranch 10 miles on the other side. And they're in the middle of nowhere. Nobody around them. And it was about a week and a half to 2 weeks before the mutilation, until they found the cow. They saw these bright flashes, and they noticed it because in their living room, they had their picture window open, the curtains were open, and off in the distance they saw these flashes, you know, and they're kind of like watching it, and that was it. That was basically it. But they did see flashes of light. They didn't think about it too much. They didn't really know what, but it wasn't that they were scared. But they kind of put it back in the back of their mind until I asked them about it. Also, something that I found out afterwards, because I like to stay in touch with these ranchers for at least 2-3 weeks after the fact to help them through with any questions, and that's why I'm still talking to this rancher. A couple of days, I was talking to him, and actually he called me. He says, "Chucky," he goes, "I got a question to ask you. Have you ever heard of people getting sick from these things?" And I said, "Well, why?" He says, "Well, we didn't touch the animal. We were within about 4 feet of the animal when we found it. Man, our muscles ache, and I got a headache and some other things too." And I said, "Is it real bad?" He goes, "Well, no, not really, but it's it's enough that we're noticing it. It's both me and my wife because they were both there." And I said, "Well, obviously, if it persists for the next couple of days, go see your doctor, get a checkup.
Yeah.
We need to find out what that issue is." Now, that does happen some cases. I had one case where a rancher actually touched the animal. Later on that day, his whole arm went numb, and and then the next day he was ill for a little while, and then he came out of it. He was fine, but that does happen sometimes, not all the time. But I was tracking that. I contacted him a couple of days later. "How you doing? You feeling okay?" "Yeah, things are fine." I have a theory on that we can touch on later if you want to, you want to hear. But so there are some cases where you can get ill from investigating animal mutilations.
Right. And we were talking to somebody else not that long ago about just the ailments that people get near crafts, or James Fox's new documentary where the police officer fell ill and died because he held this strange little creatures in his hands. Like, it's just, there are ailments. And when you hear reports from, the Congress hearings that there's been no side effects so far between these objects and humans or aircrafts, and we're like, BS. Right? There's constant people being affected by this. And if cattle mutilation is indeed part of this phenomenon, it is evidence. People keep saying, "Where's the evidence?" This is the evidence.
That is the evidence.
Yeah, we haven't filmed one yet.
My gosh.
Yeah, we haven't filmed one in action, but the results are there. The suspicious, like activity of the lights, and then obviously finding an animal with, let's just face it, cuts and parts missing out of it that is surgically, like laserly cut. Like, you couldn't even do that if you were a surgeon. Like, it would take you forever to get that perfect.
How don't you get no blood on the white fur?
Yeah.
Even an operation, with our best surgeons, there's blood. I was present at my daughter's birth. My wife had a C-section. They let me film it. I was a med student, so I'm not scared of blood and guts. But there's a lot of blood and guts, okay? I don't know how you would do something like that, as invasive as that, and just not leave any signs, and
yeah.
Well, and for your viewers out there that are watching that are new to this, what an animal mutilation is, and we talked a little briefly about it, is it's picked up at location A, picked up, okay, not dragged, picked up, taken to location B. The mutilation occurs at location B. Then they take it to location C, which is in the general proximity of location A. I've actually had 2 cases where we found where the animal was picked up, and 50 to 60 yards away. And that's how I know, because I've actually had 2 cases and physically saw the evidence where they were picked up.
Yeah.
The last, the marks and some. Anyway, I won't go into it. But so it's the location B where the animal's drained of blood, and then the cuts are made. Now, I know the animal's already dead when the cuts are made, because when I started doing this, I was running a lot of samples down to Colorado State Veterinary Lab in Fort Collins, and they were looking at the anomaly cut. So what you do is, if you have not let's say the neck right here, so you have a cut, a round hole, you take that and you do a pie cut outside of it. So you want the anomaly cut, because you want them to look at that. And every one of the cases that I took in, there was no signs of hemorrhaging, which means the animal was already dead by the time they cut it up, which is good for me, because I couldn't imagine this poor animal struggling while they were cutting it, was getting cut up. Also, in some of the cases, the heart is collapsed, which tells me that it was bled out. Now, some people go, no, when animals die, they bled out, the heart collapses. Not true. If they're bled out, yes. But under normal circumstances, I actually was invited to go to Colorado State University years ago and perform a necropsy on a horse with students. They taught me. I went there and I actually did a couple of presentations at a couple of different years, teaching the students what animal mutilations are. So if I ever brought anything in, they would know what to do. They in turn brought me in, and I got to do a necropsy on a horse that had died of natural causes, and the heart was about the size of a volleyball, and it was not collapsed. And when you cut it open, the left and right ventricle, you'll see like grape jelly inside there, and so when a heart is collapsed, that's when it's been forcibly bled out.
What about like crushes? I've heard of people, I think it was on Skinwalker Ranch a few seasons ago. They had a cow and it had like impact, like it was hit by a friggin' train, almost as if it was dropped from some height. And even like in the impressions in the ground would allude to the same. Have you heard of, obviously you have, but what are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
Well, I giggle with Skinwalker Ranch because we did a investigation on Alien Highway outside of Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch is one of these spots where it's like one little house in the San Luis Valley. That whole area, there could be a 10-mile wide area where that place is really, all of it's hot. Yeah. You don't have to be on the ranch. We found a lot of evidence with Alien Highway way away from the ranch, talking to the Native Americans there. They told us where to go. I mean, they didn't tell us where to go. They told us where to, if we wanted to see activity, where to go. And it was nowhere near the Skinwalker Ranch. Although Skinwalker Ranch was off in a distance, I'm not saying anything negative about it. But a lot of stuff, I've done work with Prometheus before. I think Prometheus is one of the production companies. They have a tendency of exaggerating a lot, for ratings. So just keep that in mind when you watch a Skinwalker Ranch. But yes, and they're not dropped. And so when you listen to these people, this animal was dropped from, well, because they really haven't done enough of these investigations. Maybe it's their first thought when they see the animal there and there's broken bones and stuff that it was dropped, but it's not dropped. And I tell you why it's not dropped. Because if I take, let's see, we'll just take this right here. Okay, so what happens on my phone when I take this and little piece of plastic and it kind of moves around, doesn't it? Depends on how it's dropped, but it's dropped. So it'll move around. There's absolutely no evidence at all. I probably picked the wrong thing because it filled out perfect the first time. But
you need a prop dead cow. You need like
a prop. I thought you would have one, Chuck. I'm a little disappointed.
Come on, man.
I'm really sorry. When an animal is dropped, even 2-3 inches off the ground, you're going to get a little bit of movement. And so when you come across an animal mutilation, there's absolutely zero evidence of the animal's body making marks on the ground. No leg movement, no head movement, nothing. It's like a fiberglass cow that just was placed there. The animal was just placed, okay? And so it can't be dropped. Now, I knew that when I was a deputy, we were watching some training videos on jumpers who commit, people who commit suicide jumping off of a house or building 5-6-story building stuff. And when they hit the concrete, man, they bounce. Humans they'll bounce 8 feet up in the air. So even if you fall off a roof, you're not going to go, you're going to bounce a little bit. So they're not dropped, they're placed. Now, people are going, well, how do you know that? Well, because A, the lack of evidence, and B, something else I found, and I'll tell you real quick. So some of the cases I found higher levels of electromagnetic field associated with the animal. And sometimes the animals, not all the cases, very rarely, the animal's lying in a round circle. Not a crop circle, just a ground depression. I've taken soil samples from inside and outside ground depression. The cations, CECs, the nutrients are slightly altered by the cow, okay? And what tells me that what altered the nutrients is a high energy, because the soil is less soluble near the animal than, where I took the sample soil. And since I picked up, and then you go, well, why would it be high energy? Because I picked up, EMF, higher levels of EMF off of an animal and off of the ground near an animal. Not a lot, just a couple times, but enough, to start, thinking about it. And it's happened a couple of different times, so I can see a pattern now. So there's an energy source that picks up the animal. I know, as crazy as that sounds, this is the best I can do for a theory, because we never found strap marks, chain marks. We've never found tire marks of a tow truck being there picking up an animal.
Right.
We never found any vegetation or anything, or of a helicopter picking up. But even if a helicopter picking up, even if it was a claw, there would be marks on the animal, or like I said, strap marks. Absolutely no evidence of how it was picked up. So one has to assume energy, since there was EMF readings there. It's lifted up, taken somewhere, and it's placed back down. Now, maybe depending on the height of whatever apparatus is responsible for lifting and putting it down, they put it down too hard, bones internally will break. I've had cases where the rib cage breaks right away from the backbone. The Oregon one, my gosh, the femur bone, I think it was the left femur bone, was pulled right out of the socket of the pelvic area as it was hit. Now, this was something new that I've never seen before. It had a hole in the side where something came in and maybe took out the organs, and it was hollow. When it came down, and this rancher noticed this and told me about it, and I'm like, oh my God. When it came down so hard that whatever was in the 4 or 5 stomachs that the cow has, I think it's 5 stomachs, it pushed all that out and into the empty cavity where the organs used to be. Jeez. Because there was a lot of stomach matter, and he was trying to figure that out. But then he realized, so there was so much pressure when this thing came back down, it broke the femur, or took the femur right out of the socket, pushed everything that was in the digestive tract into the cavity, open cavity of the cow. Yet there's zero evidence that this thing even moved on the ground. Zero. And a lot of these animals are laying in soft dirt, and you would see scuff marks, you'd see all kinds of stuff. Nothing. Right. This is the phenomenon of animal mutilations. So the best we can figure, who's ever doing it is using some type of energy source.
They must think we're incredibly stupid, though, because they're like, oh, let's just take a cow, let's do our thing, just bring it back. They're not going to know, so they're just going to think it died naturally. It's fine. They're stupid. They're human. But, and it's mysterious, because even the way that you're explaining it, I mean, it's almost time and time again, verbatim, exactly what happened to the last farmer. I mean, the fact that this cow is taken, there's no traces. To be able to pull off this operation, even if you're, like you were mentioning, magicians early, if you're the best magician in the world, you're doing this, you're catering to who? There's no audience. Yeah. It's not like anybody's looking for this. It's just that it's affecting ranchers. We should do a part 2 to this, Louis, because we're running out of time, because we got to keep it within an hour's time, right? I know this is your
favorite subject. You can chat all day about it.
Freaking day. I definitely want to.
To your point on the evidence, though, having evidence and not having evidence also say something as well, right? Mm-hmm. How does somebody do this 10,000 times as a hoax or a prankster and never leave anything forensic?
Well, the thing is, if you want to, let's use an example of a gray, and let's say that they, at one point, and people still believe this, a lot of researchers believe it, and that, grays are more like worker bees. And then there's supposedly the reptilians or the tall grays that kind of control the regular grays. And because you have tall grays and short grays. Now, if the grays are just doing whatever they're going to do, then it's basically, someone wants an engine for for their car. So they steal your car, take the engine out, but the car's still registered to you, so you bring it back.
Right.
And they don't have a place for it. Maybe that's the case too. They take what they need. They really have no place to store 1,100 or 1,200 pound cow, and so they put it back. But they put it back close to where they picked it up. Not exactly, but when you look at this, just think about technology. Think about what technology we didn't have, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, or my gosh, you go back in the Salem days with a Bic lighter, you'll get burned at the stake. It's a witch.
Yeah.
So it's just, in my opinion, it's just technology. It's advanced technology. That's why we can't catch it with cameras. I put motion sensing cameras out in areas, but a camera emits a field, electromagnetic field from the batteries, because it's an instrument. And with the right technology, and I'm sure our military helicopters can spot certain types of technologies when they're in an area looking for whoever. But who's ever doing this, they could spot the cameras, they could spot the current being emitted from the cameras. They know it's there. They just stay out of the air, or they shut it down.
Yeah.
And that happened to me once.
No, really?
Yeah, I was Sedona. I was with my wife. We rented a Jeep, my 3 kids in her back, and we just passed one of the vortexes. I guess about 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night. Beautiful sky. We just drove past a vortex location. Brand new Jeep we rented. We were 4-buying all day. Not a problem. Just went out. Lights, everything. Jeep just kind of rolls off the side. Nobody out there. And I'm like, yeah, Richard Dreyfuss, yes, the Close Encounters.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I grabbed the door,
Yeah.
and my wife grabbed my right arm, and she said, "You're not going anywhere."
Not leaving me here with the kids. Classic wife move.
Well, I was just going to jump outside and see if something was flying over, because it's an energy source. And we were doing a dig at the Roswell debris site for the Sci-Fi Channel, and I was there with the film crew from Dateline NBC. They just have to be the film crew, and we were camping out over by the debris field. And we woke up the next morning. Every one of our cell phones, either the batteries were dead or they reset, and our vehicles, my vehicle, production crew's vehicles, were all dead. The batteries had died. Something happened that night while we were sleeping and drained everything. Luckily, the archaeologist from the University of New Mexico wasn't with us. He came driving up. I had jumper cables, and we got everything going again.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I thought, because we're definitely going to have you on again, Chuck, fairly soon after your vacation is done. We're not going to bother you while you're on vacation. But to talk about maybe a part 2 of this, because like Louis said, I love this topic. This and alien abductions is my 2 favorite topics in ufology. I love them all the topics, but these are my favorite 2. I thought we would do just quickly, between the 3 of us, process of elimination.
Okay.
Right? Just because
So is that elimination or illumination?
Whatever, however you see it. Just because I keep hearing people, it could be this, because we're talking about the couch investigators. Now, I'm going to kick off the ball here, and I'm going to say, obviously, if it was human, you could see human thought behind it. You would see some evidence. You would see tracks of some sort. There would be errors. People are sloppy. Killing a cow is not priority number 1. Like, whoever is a serial cow killer right now is amazing at covering his tracks. He'll never be caught. He's going to teach CSI a new thing, right? So saying that it's human, highly unlikely.
Very
that's in like the prank sense, you mean, right?
No. And
that would make no sense. Too elaborate.
67.
Yeah.
Or military. I'd say that's probably not going to happen. After the fact, yes, but not causing and creating it. I think, why would they bring it back? They would just take it and keep it and dump it.
Evil had made mistakes.
Sure. Yeah. You're not going to get away with it over 10,000 times.
No, not at all.
No. Chuck.
So cross that one out.
Yeah. What would you eliminate off the board, Chuck?
Well, I would eliminate, human intervention, just because we've never found any evidence. And like I said, every crime, and this is a crime, evidence is left there. And humans are not perfect. Like I mentioned, SEAL Team 6 with Bin Laden, the best of the best with the best equipment failed, right? Left evidence. Hell, they left a helicopter, for God's sakes. Yeah. So you have over 10,000 cases. Somebody was bound to leave evidence. Law enforcement is highly trained on looking for evidence, but they're highly trained on looking for human evidence.
Right.
Not non-human evidence, meaning not animal evidence, but something else. So they haven't found any human evidence. Predator evidence is really easy. A mountain lion or bear or something. There's carnage everywhere, movement everywhere. I had 2 horses in Rush, Colorado. They were mutilated. They're, I don't know, about maybe 20 feet away from each other. The deputies didn't know what to do. They were looking and going, well, it's got to be animal cruelty. It's got to be human, because we found no evidence of any predators doing it. But yet we found no evidence of humans doing it either. But we only had that little box to check off in the report. We don't have animal, human, unknown.
Yeah. Well, there's no link between the two. How a human and the animal would have even been together at the same time at the time that the animal was mutilated. There's a gap there. We don't know what the hell happened. And it's obviously not nature, because nature wouldn't kill an animal off that fast and be precise about which organ it took first, right? Like, these are repeatable, right?
And that's absolutely true. And I was mentioning that MUFON is doing a press release on an animal mutilation that happened night before last out of Oklahoma. And I told him, before you do a press release, call me, talk to me before lunch today, because I might have acquired information to either credit or discredit this. I talked to the deputy this morning who used to live on a farm, grew up on a farm, had farm animals, looked at this animal that the MUFON investigator, there was their very first animal mutilation. So a very, very inexperienced person looking at this at night with flashlights. So, so it's even worse yet to claim it to be a mutilation. The deputy saw it there in the morning. I talked, had a good 25 minutes this morning with him. He says, the lower jaw wasn't cut like you see in Texas. It was ripped. It was ripped away. I've never, ever seen that. The only time you'll see that is when a scavenger, like coyotes, will take it and rip away. And then also there was some ripping along the side and then along the anal area. Nothing that said precise cuts.
Right.
I had all that information, and the MUFON investigator was supposed to contact me, and she decided she's going to roll with it, do a press release with MUFON, da-da-da. And I was interviewed by a major magazine for an article down the road. And I told them, I said, look, I just, we have mutilations that are natural. They're not mutilations. The animal just died naturally. Scavengers got to it. And that's what happened in Oklahoma a couple of nights ago. So it's going to be interesting when this comes out. MUFON comes out with their...
Yeah, but these days, who wants to listen to an expert? Who wants to listen to an expert? Honestly,
this person, I spent over an hour while this person was driving to the mutilation case, explaining what to look for, what to do this, what to do, how to do it, this or that. And then afterwards, I talked to this person, see how it worked, spent a lot of time on it. So when they did the press release today, you think they would mention my name? Hell no, they didn't mention my name. As the expert that guided them through this, it was just these two people from MUFON, and that's how the press release. And then when I asked them, I said, no, thanks for including my name. Well, we didn't think it was necessary. I'm like, well, screw you guys. See if I help you again.
Yeah, exactly. You should get your reward for that.
Well, no, just a name. I don't ask.
Well, no, but still, obviously, it's a big case. And if you're helping out, you're spending that much time. Yeah, exactly. Throw me a frickin' bone here. Louis, do you have any final questions for our guest today? I know we have to wrap things up, but
no. Well, just a big thanks to Chuck. It's the third time on the show. I don't think we've had anybody else on 3 times. Every time it's a whole new show.
Ralph Blumenthal was the third time, but this is it's a rarity. Yeah,
we learned something. I'm sure our audience
have me a 4th time so I can beat his record.
Yeah,
we'll have to fly you across the border here. We know you're a former cop, so you got a clean record. You shouldn't have a problem crossing.
Yeah, but I can't bring the gun across the border.
We're not so gunny in Canada. We shake hands first. That we don't just shoot first. But I understand everybody's right to own firearms. Don't send me any hate mail, please.
Oh no! I'm not, and I totally agree. I believe in everybody's right to do whatever they want to do, be whoever they want to be. It's your life, for God's sakes.
Yeah, exactly. And ufology can take a page out of that book where we all have an opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's great. I can see my opinion. I can see yours. Where is healthy debate gone? And I think we just need to have a coffee with somebody we totally disagree with and do it like an educated human, and we'll all be wiser for it. So,
like mature adults.
As I always, with these podcasts, especially ones like yours that are so popular, if any of your viewers have any questions, go to ufonut.com. You can see at the top, it says, email me. That's my direct email. And I'll answer whatever questions, you might have. It may take me a couple of days, if I get inundated with a bunch of emails and working these other cases too. And then, of course, next week I'm going to be on a Mediterranean cruise, so I won't be answering.
Poor bugger.
So if you have any questions, you better get them to me before Friday at lunchtime, where we're taking off to the airport.
Awesome. Well, we're releasing this episode in just a couple days from now. So when you guys are hearing it at home, this is current. In fact, today's April 26th, and I think we're releasing it on the 28th. So
yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll be enjoying a Mediterranean cruise. Now, as an investigator, I take stuff with me. I have my cameras, my night vision, my EMF meter, because you never know where you might run into something. So I always take a small pack with me when I go on vacation, just in case, because it seems like when people are on vacation, they see things.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's true. And never be without it, right? You're always with something.
Got to. The first time you're not, you're going to like be banging your head against the wall.
Absolutely. Chuck, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great vacation. And like I said, we'll have you back on because this subject is so wide, has so many topics, and you investigated a lot of them. So again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And if I have any updates when I get back, I'll let you guys know what's going on.
Perfect.